The heat hit Leo Maxwell like a wall. The moment he stepped out of the Crown, Vic August in Biloxi clung to everything: tune, skin, concrete. Even the air itself felt thick enough to chew. He loosened the knot of his tie, already damp, and tugged at the collar of his polo shirt. The Golden Tide Casino shimmered under the oppressive sun, a gaudy palace promising escape, built on a foundation of calculated risk. He needed this job, needed it to quiet the ghosts. Security wasn't a career choice anymore. It was a holding pattern. A way to prove he could still see things, that the Bureau hadn't broken him. A long shot at redemption he wasn't even sure he deserved. He swiped his card at the employee entrance, the automatic doors sighing open with a blast of air conditioning. The contrast was immediate and almost violent. Inside, the casino hummed with a low thrum of manufactured excitement. Even at 11 p.m., the floor was busy, a swirling mass of hopeful faces and desperate hands. The scent of cheap perfume and desperation hung heavy in the air. "Maxwell, you are on shift," a voice barked. Frank Rourke, the head of security, a man built like a brick shithouse with a permanent scowl etched into his face. He tossed Leo a ring of keys. "Camera duty tonight. Level 3. Keep an eye on things, and try not to fall asleep. This ain't a retirement home." Leo didn't bother replying. Rourke barely registered acknowledgement anyway. He just wanted a body in the chair. He took the keys and headed towards the elevators. Level 3 housed the surveillance room, a windowless bunker overlooking the main casino floor. That and the loading docks, the room was predictably sterile. Rows of monitors blinked with shifting images of the casino floor. The card tables, the roulette wheels, the endless rows of slot machines. A bank of radios crackled with the disembodied voices of floor security. Leo settled into the worn chair, the vinyl sticking to his skin. "Dispatch to Level 3, you with me?" A voice, clipped and efficient, came through the speaker. "Level 3 reading you." Leo kept his voice even, professional. He knew the drill. "Just confirming you're on station. We've got a higher than usual crowd tonight." A couple of tour buses rolled in, expected to stay busy. "Copy that." The chatter continued mundane reports of spilled drinks, a minor dispute at the craps table, a lost wallet, background noise, a subtle tension, a nervous energy rippling through the staff. He'd learned to recognize it during his years with the FBI. The almost imperceptible shift in body language, the hurried whispers, the too bright smiles. He picked up snippets of conversation as he scanned the radio frequencies. Heard old man Hemmings is practically living down at the docks these days. Something about a big shipment coming in tomorrow, but no one's saying what. Rourke's been on edge all week, like he is waiting for something to drop. Shipment. That word snagged his attention. The Golden Tide received deliveries all the time: Subin linens, slot machine parts, liquor. Nothing unusual about that. But the way it was spoken, hushed, loaded with implication. He zoomed in on camera feed 7, focusing on the main loading dock. A couple of dock workers were taking a smoke break, their faces obscured by the dim lighting. One of them glanced nervously towards the security cameras, before flicking his cigarette butt into a puddle. Leo felt a prickle on the back of his neck. It was a familiar sensation, sight-y. The instinct that had served him so well during his time at the Bureau. He'd learned to trust it, to live by it. And it was telling him something was off. But the Bureau, a flash of icy blue, the static of a broken radio. A warehouse, cavernous and dark, the scent of gunpowder and rain. The image ripped through him, fractured, chaotic, a nightmare replayed on an endless loop. The raid gone wrong, the informant who lied, the panicked scramble for cover, Agent Ramirez caught in the crossfire. The weight of it slammed into him, stealing his breath. He hadn't seen Ramirez in too long. Not since the official investigation had closed, labeling it a tragedy, a miscalculation. His miscalculation. He gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. Years of therapy, of trying to compartmentalize, and it still came back. The guilt, the self-doubt, the knowledge that he'd failed. He closed his eyes, fighting to regain control. He couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Not tonight. He needed to focus. He had a job to do. He needed to prove he still had what it took. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Leo refocused on the monitors. He began a systematic scan of the casino's financial feeds, checking for anomalies. Part of his routine was to monitor the slot machine payouts, looking for patterns that might indicate tampering. Internal theft was a constant concern. Hours passed, marked only by the rhythmic flicker of the screens and the ceaseless chatter of the radios. The casino floor slowly thinned out, the crowds replaced by a smattering of dedicated gamblers and late-night drinkers. Outside, the sky darkened, and the first rumblings of thunder echoed in the distance. A storm was brewing. He almost resigned himself to a quiet night when he noticed it. A discrepancy in the payout logs for machine number 47. A series of small wins spread out over the last hour. That didn't align with the machine. It wasn't much. Sudar, a few dollars here and there. Foodie, but it was enough to trigger his suspicion. He zoomed in on the data. Comparing it to historical trends, the machine's average payout rate was historically stable, almost predictable. Yet, in the last 60 minutes, it had been subtly skewed. Not enough to raise any immediate alarms, but enough to suggest something wasn't right. He pulled up the machine's maintenance logs. Standard checks, nothing out of the ordinary. The last technician to work on it was a guy named Miller, a low-level employee with a clean record. He cross-referenced Miller's work schedule for the past month. He serviced machine 47 several times, and he also worked extensively on machines in the high roller lounge Fiston, the exclusive area reserved for the casino's biggest spenders. A sudden connection sparked in Leo's mind. The high rollers. They were known to exploit loopholes in the system, to find ways to manipulate the odds. Could this be related? He accessed the surveillance footage from near machine 47. He fast-forwarded through the last hour, meticulously reviewing the images. It was a tedious process, but he was relentless. He needed to find something, anything, that would explain the anomaly. Then, he saw it, a fleeting moment, barely noticeable amidst the chaos of the casino floor. A man in a dark suit, standing near machine 47, subtly adjusting something on the side panel. He was only visible for a few seconds, his face obscured by the shadows. But Leo recognized the build, the gait. It was Victor Salieri, a notorious gambler known for his connections to organized crime. Salieri was a regular at the Golden Tide, a high-stakes player with a reputation for being ruthless. He was known to dabble in less-than-legal activities, and he'd been the subject of several FBI investigations in the past, though nothing had stuck. Leo's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a simple case of internal theft. This was something bigger, something far more dangerous. He reached for the radio, intending to alert Rourke, but then he hesitated. Rourke wouldn't care about a subtle anomaly in the payout logs. He'd dismiss it as a glitch, a random fluctuation. He needed concrete evidence. He needed proof. He pulled up Salieri's profile in the casino's database. His listed address was a luxury condo on the beach. He cross-referenced that with local property records. The condo was owned by a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Classic money laundering. He was building a case, a fragile one, built on hunches, and circumstantial evidence. But it was a start. Dispatch, this is level 3. Requesting background check on a Victor Salieri. The response was immediate. Salieri Victor, known associate of the Maritti crime family. Previous investigations for illegal gambling and extortion. No convictions. Proceed with caution. Leo's instincts were confirmed. He was onto something outside. The storm had intensified. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a banshee. The power flickered momentarily, plunging the surveillance room into darkness. Leo swore under his breath. Then, through the static on the radio, he heard a voice, a different voice, a low, gravelly whisper. A maintenance worker, speaking to dispatch. "Yay, just letting you know. The shipment's coming in, should be here any minute." It is a big one, real big." The transmission cut out, replaced by a burst of static. Leo leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What shipment? And why was it being delivered in the middle of a storm? He stared at the loading dock camera, the rain blurring the image. He tried to adjust the focus, straining to see through the downpour. Then, he saw the headlights. 2 sets of headlights, cutting through the darkness, a pair of black vans, pulling up to the loading dock. And as the vans came to a stop, Leo noticed something else. The silhouettes of figures emerging from the vehicles. Men carrying long, metallic cases. Cases that looked suspiciously like weapon crates. The metallic tang of ozone hung in the air, a residue of the lightning that had briefly knocked out the power. Leo stared at the loading dock monitors, the images now clearer. 2 black vans, unmarked, sat idling in the rain. Men in dark, waterproof jackets were unloading crates, not the standard linens or liquor deliveries. These were long, rectangular, and bore no identifying marks. He replayed the footage from the last 10 minutes, frame by frame. The unloading process was surprisingly efficient. Almost rehearsed. The crates were moved with a practiced ease that suggested the handlers knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't casino employees. He zoomed in on one of the men, trying to get a better look at his face. But the man's hood was pulled low, obscuring his features. Just another face in the storm. He shifted his focus back to the payout logs, re-examining the discrepancies on machine 47. The small winds continued, steadily draining the machine. It was a slow bleed designed to go unnoticed, except he had noticed. He cross-referenced the payout data with the timestamps from the surveillance footage, and that is when he found it. A 3-minute gap in the recording from camera 12, the camera directly overlooking machine 47. A complete blackout. The feed simply cut out for precisely 180 seconds, then resumed as if nothing had happened. Impossible. The security system was redundant. Multiple backups, complete power loss would have triggered alarms, and there were no records of any alarms being triggered. It wasn't a power surge. It was a deliberate cut. Someone had disabled the camera. He called down to the tech booth, buzzing Mark Finley, the junior surveillance technician on duty. Finley was a college kid, more interested in video games than security protocols. "Finley, this is level 3. I am looking at camera 12. There is a 3-minute gap in the recording from 11:47 to 11:50. Can you explain that?" A long pause, a shuffling sound. Yeah, about that. There was a glitch, a momentary signal interruption, I think. Happens sometimes with the old system. Finley's voice sounded strained. A glitch that conveniently coincides with anomalous activity on machine 47. Leo pressed, keeping his tone neutral. "Just a coincidence, I swear. I didn't think anything of it." "Did you log the interruption?" Another pause. "No, sir, I didn't." Leo sighed. "Finley, I want you to pull the system logs for all cameras on level 1 during that time frame. and I want a full report on any recent maintenance or repairs performed on camera 12. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Finley's voice was barely a whisper now. Leo muted the radio and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The camera cut wasn't a glitch. It was a cover. Someone was actively trying to hide something, and Finley was clearly holding back. 10 minutes later, Finley's voice crackled over the radio. Sir, I ran the logs. There was a contractor on site earlier today, working on camera 12. A guy named Raul Reyes. He is a freelance tech, does work for a lot of the casinos on the coast. Reyes. Did he file a work order? Describe the nature of the repair. Yeah, there is a work order. Says he was replacing a faulty fiber optic cable. Standard maintenance stuff. But he didn't log the completion of the work, and he left a couple hours early. And he didn't mention anything about a deliberate blackout. No, sir. Just the faulty cable. Finley sounded increasingly nervous. Leo rubbed his temples. Reyes, a freelance tech with a convenient excuse and a suspiciously incomplete work order. It was starting to feel like a carefully constructed facade. He shifted his attention to the casino's delivery manifests, accessing the digital records through a secure connection. He searched for deliveries made in the last 24 hours, focusing on shipments destined for the loading docks. He scrolled through page after page of routine orders, food dye linens, cleaning supplies, slot machine parts. Then he found it. A delivery manifest dated yesterday, listing a shipment from Coastal Logistics, a company he didn't recognize. The stated contents were electronic components. The listed weight, 12,000 pounds. That was impossible. Even a full shipment of servers and computer hardware wouldn't weigh that much. He cross-referenced the manifest with invoices from Coastal Logistics and found no record of the shipment. This wasn't just a discrepancy, it was a fabrication. Coastal Logistics was a shell company, and the weight was a blatant lie. He printed the manifest and highlighted the impossible weight entry. He needed to get this to Rourke, but he knew Rourke wouldn't be happy about being presented with circumstantial evidence. He preferred things neat, tidy, easily explainable. Before he could make a decision, the radio crackled to life with a frustrated voice. It was floor security. Dispatch to all units. We've got a situation at the blackjack tables. Dealer number 14, Jerry Kaplan, just walked out with approximately $5,000 in casino funds. He has been terminated, requesting surveillance footage and a description of his vehicle. Kaplan, a low-level dealer. Suddenly, the seemingly unrelated incidents began to coalesce into a disturbing pattern. A dealer skimming cash during a camera blackout, a phantom shipment of heavy, unidentified crates, a freelance tech with a suspicious work order. It felt like a distraction, a calculated move designed to create chaos and divert attention. But from what? Dispatch, this is level 3. Can you confirm the time frame of Kaplan's walkout? Leo asked, his voice carefully controlled. Approximate time frame is between 11:45 and 11:55 p.m. Right, during the camera malfunction on level 1. Leo stared at the monitor, his blood turning cold. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a coordinated operation. Kaplan's theft wasn't an isolated incident. It was a deliberate distraction, timed perfectly to coincide with the camera blackout and the unloading of the mysterious crates. Someone was cleaning house, and they were doing it with surgical precision. He printed out the delivery manifest, along with the information about Raul Reyes and Jerry Kaplan. He started to compile a report for Rourke, laying out his findings as clearly and concisely as possible. He knew Rourke would demand proof, so he included every scrap of evidence he'd gathered, no matter how tenuous. He was barely halfway through the report when the lights flickered again, this time plunging the surveillance room into complete darkness. The emergency generators kicked in a few seconds later, restoring partial power, but the monitors remained black. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered under his breath. Then he heard it. A sudden, violent squall raging outside, accompanied by a fresh deluge of rain. The wind howled, rattling the windows of the surveillance room, and through the downpour he saw it. Another vehicle approaching the loading docks, a large, unmarked delivery truck, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The truck was emblazoned with a faded logo, Coastal Logistics. The truck pulled directly up to the dock, shielded from view by the storm. Its brake lights flared, then went dark, and in that brief moment of illumination, Leo noticed something that sent a shiver down his spine. The truck wasn't there to deliver anything, it was there to receive. A ramp was lowering on the back of the truck, facing inwards, ready to accept the contents of the crates that were still being unloaded from the black vans. He reached for the radio, intending to alert Rourke again. But before he could speak, the radio went dead. Static, nothing but static. The power flickered once more, and the surveillance room was plunged back into darkness. This time, the emergency generators didn't kick in. The darkness in the surveillance room was absolute, oppressive. The scent of burnt electronics mingled with the damp smell of the storm. Leo fumbled for his phone, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing the useless black rectangles of the monitors. He was blind, deaf, and cut off. He had to get out of here. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, navigating the cramped space by memory. He needed to find Rourke to explain what was happening, but a nagging voice in the back of his head told him that Rourke wouldn't believe him, not without irrefutable proof. And right now, he had nothing but a collection of unsettling coincidences and a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. He bypassed the main elevators, opting for the service stairs. He needed to move fast before whoever was behind this had a chance to cover their tracks. Outside, the storm was raging. Rain lashed against his face, and the wind threatened to rip his jacket from his back. He headed towards the parking garage, determined to track down the Coastal Logistics truck. He'd already run the license plate through every database he could access. The truck was registered to a mailbox in a strip mall on the outskirts of town, a classic shell company, but the manifest listed a delivery address, a Dainio warehouse in the industrial district, owned by a company called Alliance Distribution. He found the truck easily enough, parked near the loading docks. It was empty, the back ramp still lowered, glistening wet in the rain. He circled it cautiously, scanning for any signs of activity. Nothing. He drove to Alliance Distribution, a sprawling, windowless warehouse that looked deserted. The parking lot was empty save for a couple of beat-up pickup trucks. He parked his own car in the shadows and approached the warehouse on foot, his hand instinctively reaching for the Glock he kept locked in his glove compartment. Old habits died hard. The main gate was secured with a chain and padlock. He skirted around it, following the perimeter fence until he found a section that had been compromised. The main compromised a 30 portion of the chain-link fence that had been bent and twisted, creating a makeshift opening. He slipped through the gap and stepped onto the warehouse property. The air was thick with the smell of oil and dust. He moved cautiously, staying close to the shadows. The warehouse was surprisingly active. Forklifts whirred back and forth, moving pallets stacked high with unmarked crates. Workers hurried about their tasks, their faces grim and focused. It was a well-oiled machine operating with a chilling efficiency. He observed for several minutes, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The crates didn't match anything he'd expect to find in a typical distribution center. They were uniform in size and shape, suggesting they contained something specific, something valuable. He noticed a pattern in the forklift traffic. Pallets were being unloaded from the Coastal Logistics truck, then moved to a designated staging area, and finally loaded onto other trucks destined for points unknown. It was a transshipment point, a hub for illegal activity. He needed to get closer, He found a small, unlocked office near the loading docks. A lone security guard sat behind a desk, staring blankly at a monitor. The guard was a young man, barely out of high school, with nervous eyes and a twitchy manner. Leo flashed his old FBI badge, hoping to intimidate him. It worked. The guard paled visibly. "I need to ask you a few questions," Leo said, his voice firm. "About the deliveries to this warehouse, specifically the ones from Coastal Logistics." The guard hesitated, then stammered. I don't know anything about that, sir." "Don't lie to me," Leo said, leaning closer. "I know the truck arrived a few hours ago. I know it is full of unaccounted for merchandise, and I know you're responsible for security here." The guard's eyes darted around the room. He looked like he was about to break down. "Look, I just work here," he mumbled. "I'm just a security guard. Someone's paying you to look the other way, isn't that right?" Leo pressed. "Tell me what is going on." The guard sighed, defeated. Okay, I'll tell you, but you gotta promise me you won't get me involved." Leo didn't bother making promises he couldn't keep. He just nodded. "There are runs," the guard said, his voice barely a whisper. "Deliveries that come in late at night, outside of the normal schedule. We're told to ignore them, not to ask questions, and we're paid extra to do so." "Who pays you?" Leo asked. "A guy named Sal DeMarco. He is the warehouse manager. He says he is working for Mr. Reynolds." "Reynolds? Yeah. I don't know much about him, just that he is important, and that we don't mess with his business." "Do you know what is being delivered?" The guard shook his head. "No, sir, we're not supposed to know. We just load and unload. That is it." Leo thanked the guard a perfunctory gesture and left the office, his mind reeling. Sal DeMarco, Mr. Reynolds. The pieces were starting to fall into place, revealing a picture of organized crime operating with impunity. He walked away from the warehouse, the rain soaking through his clothes. He was starting to see how meticulously planned this operation was. The camera blackout, the phantom shipment, the paid-off security guard. It all pointed to a level of sophistication that was deeply unsettling. A jarring image flooded his mind. The warehouse again, but this time it was years ago. During his time with the FBI, a raid gone wrong, a misread signal, the chaos of gunfire, Agent Reyes caught in the crossfire. He'd been the team leader on that raid. He'd made the call to move based on faulty intelligence, and because of his mistake, Reyes had paid the ultimate price. The memory was a constant torment, a reminder of his failure. He'd spent years trying to suppress it, to convince himself that he'd done everything he could, but the guilt lingered, a heavy weight on his soul. He touched his chest, feeling the phantom ache of a wound he hadn't sustained. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that this current case was eerily similar to that old raid. The same level of secrecy, the same intricate planning, the same sense of dread. And then it hit him. The camera maintenance schedule. He'd glanced at it earlier, dismissing it as routine. But now he realized that the timing of the camera outages wasn't random. It coincided perfectly with the scheduled maintenance visits by Raul Reyes. He hadn't just been repairing the cameras, he'd been disabling them. They knew the schedule. They had someone on the inside. He pulled out his phone, intending to call Roque again. But before he could dial the number, his phone buzzed. "Stop digging, or you won't be here after the storm." He stared at the message, his blood running cold. This wasn't just about a stolen shipment anymore. This was a threat, a warning. He looked up, scanning the surroundings. He was alone, but he knew he was being watched. He could feel their eyes on him, lurking in the shadows. The storm was intensifying. The wind howled like a predator, and the rain fell in sheets. He was trapped, exposed, and alone, and he had a feeling that the worst was yet to come. The text message hung in the air like a premonition. "Stop digging, or you won't be here after the storm." Leo stared at the screen, the glow reflecting in his rain-streaked face. It wasn't a bluff. He could feel it. He needed to be smarter, more cautious. He couldn't go to Rourke, not yet. He needed leverage, undeniable proof. And he needed allies. He needed someone who knew the Golden Tide from the inside, someone who could navigate the labyrinthine bureaucracy and unspoken rules. He needed Marta Kowalski. Marta was a floor manager, a lifer at the casino. She'd started as a cocktail waitress 30 years ago and worked her way up through the ranks. She knew everyone, everything. And crucially, she didn't openly embrace Rourke's brand of rigid, unquestioning authority. Finding her wasn't difficult. She was stationed at the main pit, overseeing the roulette tables, her face a mask of controlled calm amidst the escalating chaos of the approaching hurricane. "Marta," Leo said, keeping his voice low. "Got a minute?" She glanced at him, her expression guarded. "Maxwell, what can I do for you?" "I need your help. I'm looking into some irregularities, delivery discrepancies, camera malfunctions, things that don't add up." Marta's eyes narrowed. "Irregularities? What kind of irregularities?" He decided to risk a partial disclosure. "I suspect someone is using the casino as a conduit for unauthorized activities, and I believe they have inside help." Marta didn't react, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just resignation. She'd seen things in her 30 years at the Golden Tide, things she probably didn't talk about. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Access to the maintenance logs, specifically for the past 6 months. I want to see who has been working on the security cameras, when, and what repairs were performed." Marta hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I can get that for you. It is not official, of course. Rourke keeps a tight leash on those records. But I have ways." She disappeared into a back office and returned a few minutes later with a stack of printed documents. "Here, everything they've logged. Be careful with this, Leo. If Rourke finds out, I understand." He spread the logs out on a nearby table and began to pore over them. It was a tedious task, but he was meticulous. He cross-referenced the maintenance schedules with the dates of the camera outages and the reported deliveries, and a pattern began to emerge. Several of the camera malfunctions coincided with scheduled roof work, inspections, repairs, routine maintenance. But the timing was convenient. Each outage occurred during periods of high-value games, during the high-roller tournaments and the peak hours of the poker room. Someone knew when and where the cameras were most critical, and they were exploiting that knowledge. "Roof work," Leo muttered, circling the entries with a pen. "That is awfully convenient." Marta leaned closer, peering at the logs. "The roof crew, they're a different bunch, mostly contractors, come and go as they please. Nobody pays them much attention." That gave him an idea. He needed to know who was on that roof crew. He needed to find a connection. Back in the surveillance room, the power had been restored, but the mood was even more strained. He remembered the contractor portal, a rarely used system for managing external service providers. He hadn't thought much about it before. It had never been part of his security sweeps. During his initial assessment, he spent the next hour cracking the portal's security key. Thankfully, the password protection was lax. He found a database of all the contractors who'd worked at the Golden Tide in the last year. He started searching, cross-referencing names with his knowledge of known criminals and his old FBI case files. A name that sent a jolt of ice through his veins. Danny Vargas. He read the name aloud. Vargas, that name. It can't be. Vargas was a ghost from his past, a low-level operative he'd investigated years ago during a sting operation targeting a counterfeiting ring. Vargas had slipped through his fingers, disappearing before he could be apprehended. He'd been a minor player then, just a foot soldier, but seeing his name here connected to the Golden Tide, it meant something. It meant this went deeper than he'd initially thought. He pulled up Vargas's file, scrolling through the details. The address listed was a P.O. box in New Orleans. His listed skills: roofing, general maintenance, and security systems. The connection was undeniable. Vargas was the one responsible for the roof work. He was the one disabling the cameras, and he was almost certainly working with the others. The casino's public address system crackled to life, breaking his concentration. Attention, all guests and employees. This is a hurricane warning. Hurricane Isabella is currently tracking towards the Gulf Coast. We are initiating phase 1 of our storm preparedness plan. All outdoor furniture has been secured. Valuables are being moved to secure locations. Further instructions will be given as the situation develops. Phase 1, evacuation was inevitable. Time was running out. He needed to expose this operation before the storm hit, before anyone could destroy the evidence. He turned back to the maintenance logs, grabbing a copy to take with him. He needed to confront Roque, to present him with the facts. But he knew it was a risky move. Roque was notoriously stubborn, and he wouldn't hesitate to dismiss Leo's concerns if he didn't have concrete proof. "Marta," Leo said as he found her watching the swirling grey sky out a window. "I need to talk to Roque," she sighed. "He is in a meeting with the casino owners. They're discussing the evacuation plan. He won't be receptive to anything right now. I don't have a choice. This is important." "Leo," Marta said, her voice low and urgent. "Be careful. Something feels wrong. Very wrong." He nodded, grabbing his jacket and heading towards Roque's office. The casino was already in a state of controlled panic. Guests were checking out, tables were being cleared, and employees were scurrying around, securing the property. As he passed the loading docks, he saw a small group of maintenance workers taking a break. He almost didn't notice Marta standing near the dumpsters behind them, her face pale and drawn. He approached her cautiously. "Marta, what is wrong?" She didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on something inside a large black trash bag. She slowly reached down and untied the bag, peering inside. Her breath hitched in her throat. She pulled out a handful of casino coin rolls, their silver surfaces gleaming in the dim light. They looked unremarkable at first glance, but then Leo saw it. Each roll was stamped with a unique serial number, and one of those serial numbers, he recognized it from a file he'd reviewed years ago. Back during his FBI days, a file relating to a cold case involving a series of counterfeit poker chips. "Oh, God," Marta breathed, her voice trembling. This is bad. "Leo, this is really bad." The serial number seared itself into Leo's memory, B7492, XC. He remembered it vividly, from the faded photographs and meticulous logs of the Cardinal counterfeiting case. A seemingly minor detail amidst a labyrinth of deceit and betrayal. Now, staring at the coin roll in Marta's trembling hand, he realized it wasn't T minor at all. It was a breadcrumb, leading him straight back to his past. He needed to see the old files, the original case files for Operation Cardinal. They were archived at the New Orleans field office, gathering dust in some forgotten storage room. He called in a favor, pulling every string he had left, reminding his former colleagues of shared risks and long nights. It took hours, but finally, a box of yellowed files arrived, delivered by a disgruntled courier. He spread them out on his kitchen table, the scent of aged paper filling the room. He reread the reports, the witness statements, the forensic analyses. The Cardinal ring had been sophisticated, producing nearly flawless counterfeit poker chips, flooding the casinos of the Gulf Coast. The operation had been led by a man named Victor Martel, a shadowy figure with connections to organized crime and a penchant for disappearing when the heat got turned up. Martel. The name was a phantom limb, an old wound that had never fully healed. He'd been so close to arresting Martel, to shutting down the operation, but he'd misread a coded message, a crucial signal that had alerted Martel to the impending raid. The operation had unraveled, Martel had vanished, and Leo had been stripped of his leadership role, his career effectively derailed. Now, looking through the files, he noticed something he'd missed before. A recurring name, a seemingly insignificant player in the Cardinal operation. The same Vargas he'd identified as the roofing contractor at the Golden Tide. Vargas hadn't been a mere foot soldier. He'd been Martel's logistical coordinator, responsible for moving the counterfeit chips, laundering the money, and providing security for the operation. And he disappeared with Martel, vanished into thin air. He cross-referenced the names with the current investigation. Martel hadn't been directly involved of 40 at least, not yet. But Vargas was the linchpin, the connection between the past and the present. He needed to talk to someone who knew the Cardinal case as well as he did. He called retired Agent Frank Bellwether, his former mentor, the man who'd believed in him, even when everyone else had turned their backs. "Frank," Leo said, his voice tight with urgency, "I need your help. I'm looking into a case at the Golden Tide. It is connected to Operation Cardinal." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Cardinal, that is a name I haven't heard in a long time. What has Vargas got to do with it?" Leo explained his findings, detailing the connection between Vargas, the Golden Tide, and the suspicious deliveries. Bellwether listened in silence, then let out a weary sigh. "Vargas, that little weasel. I always knew he was more than he appeared to be. Martel was the brains, but Vargas was the muscle." "Did you ever suspect anyone else was involved? Anyone higher up?" Leo asked hesitantly. Bellwether hesitated for a moment. "There were rumors, whispers about a benefactor, a silent partner, someone with deep pockets and even deeper connections, but nothing ever came of it. The investigation was curtailed." "Curtailed? What do you mean?" "Let's just say that certain individuals weren't eager to see Martel brought to justice. There were political considerations. The case was closed prematurely. Certain leads were ignored." Leo's blood turned cold. He'd always suspected there was more to the story. He'd always felt like he'd been deliberately sabotaged. Now he had confirmation. "You think someone protected Martel?" "I wouldn't be surprised. This is Louisiana, Leo. Money talks, and corruption runs deep." The conversation left Leo feeling both vindicated and vulnerable. He'd been right all along. The Cardinal case hadn't been a failure of his own making. It had been a deliberate cover-up, but the revelation came at a cost. It meant he was treading on dangerous ground, poking a hornet's nest that had been left undisturbed for years. He relayed his findings to Rourke, presenting him with the evidence from both the current investigation and the archived Cardinal files. Rourke listened in silence, his face impassive. "So, you're saying this Vargas character was involved in a counterfeiting operation years ago, and now he is somehow connected to this mess at the Golden Tide?" Rourke asked, his voice flat. "That is right. It is the same Vargas, and I believe he is working for Martel." Rourke leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Interesting, but circumstantial. You're reconstructing an old case to fit your narrative." "It is not a narrative. It is evidence. The serial numbers, the connections, the timing. Timing can be a funny thing, Maxwell, and old files don't always tell the whole story. You've been chasing ghosts, letting a past failure color your judgment." Leo felt his anger rise. "I'm not chasing ghosts. Maybe you're too eager to prove yourself, Maxwell. To rewrite history. Just be careful you don't jump to conclusions. This casino is built on risk, not conjecture." Rourke dismissed him with a wave of his hand. I'll look into it, but don't expect any miracles. Leo stormed out of Rock's office, feeling frustrated and defeated. He'd expected skepticism, but he hadn't expected outright dismissal. Outside, the storm was worsening. The National Weather Service had upgraded Hurricane Isabella to a Category 3, with projected landfall just hours away. The casino was in full evacuation mode. High-value item, ID'd, Cindy, cash, chips, jewelry, fur, were being moved to secure vaults located deep within the building. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, the evidence he'd gathered could be lost forever, destroyed in the chaos of the evacuation. He returned to his apartment, needing to clear his head. He'd barely gotten through the door when he noticed something was wrong. The air felt stale, wrong. He flicked on the lights. The living room was in disarray. Drawers had been pulled open, clothes strewn across the floor, books knocked off the shelves. His apartment had been ransacked. He moved cautiously through the room, his hand reaching for the Glock he'd stashed under his mattress. His heart pounded in his chest. He stopped in the bedroom, his gaze falling on his pillow. Lying there, face up, was a Polaroid photograph. It was a picture of him, sleeping, taken from an angle that suggested someone had been inside his apartment, watching him while he slept. On the back of the photograph, scrawled in black ink, was a single sentence: "Stop digging, or you won't be here after the storm." The Polaroid felt like a brand, searing itself onto Leo's skin. Someone was watching him. Someone knew he was digging, and they were sending a message. A chillingly personal message. He bagged the photo as evidence, adrenaline coursing through him. This wasn't about stolen chips or counterfeit currency anymore. This was a game of survival. He replayed the events of the last 24 hours in his mind, meticulously analyzing every detail. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a disturbing picture of a complex conspiracy. It wasn't just Vargas and Martel. It was a network, a carefully constructed web of deceit involving multiple players. He had Vargas as the field operator, connected to Martel, the mastermind. The Shell Corporation, Coastal Logistics, provided the logistical support. And then there was the inside man, the mole within the Golden Tide, feeding them information and facilitating their operation. He suspected the security guard, DeMarco, was a pawn, a middle manager following orders. The real mole had to be someone with higher level access, someone who could manipulate security protocols and control the flow of information. Rourke was too obvious, too entrenched in the casino's operations to risk exposure. It had to be someone more subtle, someone who operated in the shadows. He focused on the contractor logs. Besides Vargas, there were several other recurring names associated with roof work and security system maintenance. He pulled their files, running background checks. Most were clean, but one name stood out: Sweeney D. Glein. Lee Klein owned a small electrical contracting company and had performed numerous repairs on the casino's security cameras over the past 6 months. He also had a prior conviction for fraud, a history of shady business dealings. Leo decided to test his theory. He accessed the casino's payout schedule and created a false entry, the V9, a planned high-limit payout on a specific slot machine during the next scheduled power outage. It was a gamble, but he needed to see how the conspirators would react. He wanted to flush them out. He monitored the surveillance feeds, watching for any unusual activity. He focused on Klein, Vargas, and DeMarco, tracking their movements. Within minutes, he saw it. Klein subtly altered the camera angles near the target slot machine, creating a blind spot. Vargas directed a team of workers to block access to the area, claiming they were conducting emergency repairs. And DeMarco, under the guise of increased security, stationed extra guards around the machine, effectively containing the area. It was a coordinated effort, a clear indication that they knew about the planned payout and were attempting to manipulate the situation to their advantage. His suspicions were confirmed. Klein was the mole, He was providing the inside information, enabling Vargas and Martel to exploit the casino's vulnerabilities. But before he could alert anyone, he received a panicked call from Marta. "Leo, you need to be careful," she said, her voice trembling. They know you're asking questions." "Who knows?" "Reynolds. He called me into his office. He knows I've been talking to you. He warned me to stay out of it, said my job depends on my silence." Leo's jaw tightened. Reynolds, the mysterious benefactor Bellwether had alluded to. He was the one pulling the strings. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but I can't risk my job, Leo. I have a family to support. I can't help you anymore." Leo felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He'd been counting on Marta, and now she was backing away. He understood her fear, but it didn't make it any easier. "I understand," he said, his voice strained. "Just stay safe. You too, Leo, please. Be careful." She hung up, leaving Leo feeling isolated and exposed. He'd underestimated the reach of this conspiracy. They weren't afraid to use intimidation and threats to silence anyone who stood in their way. The casino's public address system crackled to life again. "Attention all guests and employees. Hurricane Isabella is now a Category 4 storm, with sustained winds of 140 miles per h. Our direct impact is expected within the next 3 hours. We are now activating Phase 2 of our hurricane preparedness plan. All non-essential personnel are to report to designated shelter areas. The casino floor will be closing in 15 minutes. Chaos erupted. Guests rushed to the exits, scrambling to escape the approaching storm. Employees frantically secured the casino, boarding up windows and moving valuables to safe locations. And amidst the chaos, Leo noticed something else. Under the guise of hurricane preparations, a team of workers was systematically disabling the surveillance cameras, one by one. Klein was directing the operation, moving with a cold, calculated efficiency. The casino's power grid was already experiencing intermittent outages. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness, then flickered back on again. Each blackout created a blind spot, an opportunity for the conspirators to move undetected. He watched as Vargas and his team escorted a series of unmarked crates towards the floor, Vault 30, the heavily fortified room where the casino stored its cash and chips. It was happening. They were making their move. He needed to act, and act fast. He radioed Rourke, demanding immediate backup at the floor vault. "Rourke, this is Maxwell. We have a potential breach in progress. Vargas and his team are heading for the vault. I need backup now." Rourke's voice was dismissive. "Maxwell, we're in the middle of a hurricane evacuation. I don't have time for your theories. Focus on keeping the guests safe." "This isn't a theory. It is a confirmed threat. Klein is involved. He is sabotaging the security system." "Klein, you're grasping at straws, Maxwell. I'm busy. I suggest you focus on securing your own safety." Rourke hung up, leaving Leo feeling abandoned and furious. He was on his own. He raced towards the floor vault, navigating the crowded hallways. The casino was a madhouse, a swirling vortex of panic and desperation. As he approached the vault area, the lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into complete darkness. The emergency generators failed to kick in. It was a scheduled blackout, part of the hurricane protocol, but Leo knew it was also an opportunity. He activated the night vision mode on his phone and crept forward, relying on his instincts to guide him. He could hear voices in the distance, muffled but distinct. A massive steel barrier designed to withstand almost any attack. He peered through the small observation window, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, he saw Vargas and Klein, surrounded by a team of workers. They weren't securing the vault. they were opening it, and then a silent alarm. A small red light flashed on his phone, indicating that a motion sensor had been triggered inside the vault area. Someone had breached the security perimeter. Leo knew he was out of time. He reached for his radio, intending to call for backup. But as he did, a hand clamped down on his arm, silencing him. He spun around, ready to fight, but he was met with a cold, steely gaze and a warning whisper. "You've been warned." The hand on his arm was surprisingly strong, the grip visa-like. He twisted, attempting a disarm, but his assailant was quicker, more experienced. A sharp pain flared in his temple, and the world tilted. He stumbled, crashing into a stack of linen carts, the force knocking the air from his lungs. "Get him out of here," a voice commanded, cold and devoid of emotion. Rough hands grabbed him, hauling him to his feet. He fought back, but he was outnumbered, overwhelmed. They dragged him through the chaotic hallways, pushing past panicked guests and frantic employees. He was thrown into a small, windowless security office. The door slammed shut and locked behind him. He leaned against the wall, gasping for air, his head throbbing. Minutes later, Rock stormed into the office, his face crimson with fury. "What the hell is going on here, Maxwell?" he roared. "You were found near the vault during a security breach. Care to explain yourself?" "I was trying to stop them," Leo managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Vargas, Klein, they were opening the vault." Roke scoffed. "Oh, really? And how exactly did you know that?" "You just happened to be wandering around in the dark during a hurricane. I had evidence. I told you. Klein is the mole. He sabotaged the security system." Roke waved his hand dismissively. "Spare me the conspiracy theories. We've reviewed the security footage. There is an edited gap in the recording right around the time of the breach. A gap that conveniently coincides with your shift." Leo's blood ran cold. "Edited? What are you talking about?" Roke produced a tablet, displaying a series of still frames from the surveillance footage. The edited section was clear, a 3-minute blank space, just like the one he discovered earlier. But this time, it wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate. Someone had tampered with the footage, framing him. "Looks like negligence to me, Maxwell. A serious lapse in judgment. You were responsible for monitoring that area, and you conveniently failed to notice a critical security breach." "It wasn't me," Leo protested. "Someone altered the footage. They're trying to set me up." "That is a serious accusation, Maxwell. Do you have any proof?" He didn't. Not anymore. The evidence he'd gathered the maintenance logs, the delivery manifests, were all circumstantial. And now, with the footage manipulated, he looked like the fall guy. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "I'm suspending you, effective immediately. Your badge and security clearance are revoked. You're to leave the premises." He was stripped of his badge, his access card deactivated. He was escorted out of the casino like a common criminal, the stares of his colleagues burning into his back. They avoided his gaze, offering no words of support. He was an outcast, a liability. As he walked out into the storm, the rain lashing against his face, he felt a profound sense of defeat. He tried to warn them, to expose the conspiracy, but no one had listened. They'd believed the lies, the fabricated evidence. They'd dismissed him as a paranoid, washed-up agent. His phone buzzed. He ignored it, shoving his hands into his pockets. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to hear their condolences, their platitudes. But the buzzing persisted. He reluctantly pulled out his phone and checked the notification. It was an incoming video call from an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered it. The screen flickered to life, displaying a live video feed. He stared in disbelief. The video showed a large, dimly lit room. Crates, identical to the ones he'd seen being unloaded from the coastal logistics truck, were stacked high against the walls. Several figures in dark clothing were moving around the room. using crowbars and power tools to pry open the crates. The crates weren't filled with electronic components. They were filled with cash. Stacks of bundled bills overflowing from the containers. Millions of dollars stolen from the Golden Tide's vault. The camera panned across the room, revealing the face of Victor Martel. He was standing in the shadows, observing the operation with a cold, calculating gaze. He spotted the camera and gave a slight nod, a chilling acknowledgement. Then the camera lingered on a familiar face. Edgar Klein, overseeing the unloading of the cash, a smug expression on his face. He was the key. He'd betrayed the casino, betrayed his colleagues. And now he was reveling in his success. Leo's fingers trembled as he gripped the phone. They were getting away with it. They were emptying the vault, pilfering the casino's reserves, while he was being scapegoated and ostracized. A news alert popped up on his phone. He clicked on it, his heart sinking. Organized crime suspected in casino robberies along Gulf Coast. The article detailed a series of recent robberies targeting casinos in the region. Law enforcement officials were investigating the possibility that organized crime groups were exploiting the hurricane to carry out elaborate heists. The article quoted an anonymous source, claiming that the Golden Tide had been the victim of a sophisticated fraud scheme involving a compromised security system and an inside mole. He slumped back against the seat, the rain hammering against the car. He'd been right all along, but it didn't matter. No one would believe him. They dismissed him as a crank, a liability. He stared at the live feed on his phone, watching as Martel and Klein continued to orchestrate the theft. He was powerless to stop them. He was a former agent, stripped of his authority, branded as a troublemaker. He felt a surge of anger, then despair. He'd been so close to exposing them, to bringing them to justice, but he'd been outmaneuvered, outsmarted. He reached for the ignition, intending to drive away, to disappear. He couldn't face this. He couldn't face the scorn, the accusations, the knowledge that he'd failed. But then he saw something on the video feed, a subtle movement in the background, a flicker of light. The camera shifted its focus, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. A figure he recognized immediately. Marta Kowalski. She was tied up, gagged, and surrounded by two of Martel's henchmen. They were dragging her towards a darkened room. Terror gripped him. He knew what Martel was capable of. He knew what happened to those who crossed him. He couldn't just drive away. He couldn't abandon Marta to her fate. He slammed the car into gear and threw it into reverse, narrowly avoiding a collision with a passing truck. He spun the wheel and accelerated, heading back towards the Golden Tide. He was a disgraced agent, suspended from duty, stripped of his authority. But he was still Leo Maxwell, and he wasn't about to let them get away with this. He was going to save Marta, and he was going to expose the truth, no matter the cost, and he needed it now. As he sped through the storm, ravaged streets, his phone buzzed again. Another video call from the same unknown number. He answered it. This time, the screen displayed a single, menacing message: "Enjoy the show." Message thin, "Enjoy the show," burned in Leo's mind, fueling a cold fury. He parked his car a block from the Golden Tide, abandoning any pretense of following protocol. He was off the books now, operating outside the law. He was a rogue agent, a lone wolf hunting a pack of hyenas. He needed information. He needed to know where they were taking the money, what their ultimate plan was. He risked reactivating his old VPN, bypassing the casino's security, and accessing the contractor portal once more. This time, he wasn't looking for names or schedules. He was searching for a location. He found it buried deep within the system, tempting a temporary vault relocation plan. As part of the hurricane preparation, the casino's high-value assets were being moved to a secure, off-site location. A private marina owned by a shell corporation linked to Martel. A fleet of armored trucks were scheduled to transport the cash, and chips under the cover of the storm. The relocation was supposed to be a standard security procedure, but in this case, it was a meticulously orchestrated heist. He needed a team. He couldn't do this alone. His first stop was Marta's apartment. He found her shaken, but unharmed, thankfully. She'd managed to convince her captors that she was just a low-level employee, unaware of the conspiracy. They'd left her tied up in her apartment. A chilling warning. "I told you this was bad, Leo," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have listened to my gut. I need your help, Marta. I know it is a lot to ask, but I need your knowledge of the casino layout, the security protocols. Anything you can remember." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'm in. But I'm scared, Leo. Very scared." Next, he tracked down Jerry Kaplan, the fired dealer. He found him nursing a drink in a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, drowning his sorrows. "You're looking for me?" Kaplan asked, his voice slurred. "Heard I was a scapegoat. Lucky me. I know you were set up, Kaplan. I know you didn't steal that money." "I need your help." Kaplan stared at him skeptically. "Help? What help could a washed-up dealer possibly give you?" Leo explained the situation, outlining the conspiracy and the impending heist. Kaplan listened in silence, his expression slowly changing from disbelief to grudging acceptance. "So, I was a pawn in a bigger game," he said. "Figures. All right, I'm in. I know the layout of the vault, the security procedures. I can tell you how they're doing this." Finally, he reached out to Ben Carter, the maintenance tech who'd initially brushed off Leo's questions about the camera malfunctions. Carter had contacted him anonymously, expressing remorse for his silence. "I didn't know what was going on," Carter said, his voice apologetic. "I just followed orders, but I can't stand by and watch this happen. I can help you disable the security grid, create some diversions." Leo had his team, an unlikely alliance, bound together by a shared sense of betrayal and a desperate desire to do the right thing. The hurricane had reached its peak. Winds howled like banshees, and the rain fell in sheets, reducing visibility to near zero. The city was plunged into darkness, trees uprooted, power lines downed. The floodwaters were rising, turning streets into rivers. "This is insane," Marta said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "We're going to get killed." "We have to try," Leo replied, his jaw set. "The money they're stealing isn't just the casinos. It is people's livelihoods, their futures. We can't let them get away with this." Carter disabled the security cameras along their route, creating a series of blind spots. Kaplan provided them with a detailed map of the service corridors, revealing a network of hidden passages beneath the casino. They navigated the flooded tunnels, wading through knee-deep water, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The casino above them was a swirling vortex of chaos and panic, but below, it was eerily silent. "The convoy should be leaving from the rear loading docks," Kaplan said, consulting his map. "They're using a temporary access tunnel to bypass the main security checkpoints." After what felt like an eternity, they reached the access tunnel. It was a narrow, claustrophobic space, barely wide enough for two people to walk abreast. They crept forward, moving as silently as possible. Suddenly, they heard voices and the rumble of engines. They peeked around a corner and saw them. A convoy of armored trucks lined up at a makeshift loading dock. Workers in contractor uniforms were unloading crates from the trucks, loading them onto a large, privately owned yacht docked nearby. Martel was overseeing the operation, barking orders into a radio. Klein was directing the workers, a sinister grin on his face. "There they are," Leo said, his voice grim. "Let's move." They burst from the tunnel, weapons drawn. Carter threw a flashbang, momentarily blinding the workers. Kaplan created a distraction, yelling at the top of his lungs. Leo charged forward, Confronting Martel and Klein, a chaotic firefight erupted. Gunshots echoed through the storm. Workers scattered for cover. "Police, freeze," Leo shouted, knowing his claim was a lie. He no longer had any authority. Martel didn't hesitate. He drew a gun and fired at Leo, narrowly missing his head. Leo returned fire, hitting Martel in the arm. Klein lunged at Leo, swinging a crowbar. Leo ducked, sidestepped, and disarmed him with a swift kick. But as they grappled on the ground, he noticed something disturbing. The workers weren't just unloading crates. They were connecting fuel lines from the trucks to the yacht. They weren't just stealing the money. They were planning to scuttle the yacht, destroy the evidence, and disappear into the storm. "They're going to blow it up," Leo yelled to Marta and Kaplan. "Get those fuel lines disconnected." A masked figure in a contractor uniform shoved Kaplan to the ground. Marta, despite her fear, charged forward, attempting to disable the fuel lines. A shot rang out. Marta cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground. Leo's blood ran cold. He turned to see a masked figure pointing a gun at her. Before he could react, the figure pulled the trigger. But Leo was faster. He lunged forward, tackling the gunman to the ground. They wrestled for control of the weapon, the raging storm providing a dramatic backdrop to their brutal struggle. As they fought, Leo noticed something else. The yacht was already pulling away from the dock, heading towards open water, and masked figures were continuing to unload crates, preparing for the final act of destruction. The gun clattered onto the rain, slicked dock. I pinned the masked figure, breathing heavily, my adrenaline a roaring tide against my ribs. The initial shock of the tackle had bought me a moment, but the man was strong, writhing beneath me. I landed a solid punch, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone against jaw. I rolled off, scrambling to my feet. The dock was a maelstrom of chaos, shouting men, flashing lights, the relentless onslaught of the storm. Spray whipped across my face, stinging my eyes. Through the swirling rain, I saw Kaplan desperately trying to shield Marta, who was clutching her shoulder, a crimson stain blooming on her jacket. Another figure loomed over them, weapon drawn. Before I could react, Carter, the maintenance tech, hurled himself at the gunman, wrestling him to the ground. "Get the police here," Carter yelled, his voice strained. "I've triggered the local alarm. They're on their way." But my attention was drawn elsewhere, standing under a sodden raincoat. Directing the chaos with cold, precise movements was a face I hadn't seen in years. A face I thought was buried in the past. Victor Martel, not just the mastermind of the Cardinal counterfeiting operation, but the puppet master pulling the strings of this entire scheme. Relief washed over me, a dizzying sensation. I'd been right all along. Everything connected back to him. But the relief was quickly replaced by a chilling realization. Martel wasn't just running a simple heist. He was operating on a scale I hadn't imagined. "Martel," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "It is over." He turned, his eyes meeting mine. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, then vanished, replaced by a mask of arrogant amusement. "Maxwell," he said, his voice smooth and menacing, "I always knew you were a persistent little pest. But you should have stayed buried with your career. It is not just about the money, is it?" I said. "This is about covering your tracks, erasing the past." "The past is irrelevant," Martel said. "Only the present matters, and in the present, I am winning." He gestured towards Kaplan and Marta. "Unless, of course, you value their lives." Kaplan tried to shield Marta, but two of Martel's men grabbed her, holding her roughly. "Let them go, Martel," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, I think not, Agent Maxwell. You see, I've learned a thing or two over the years. Leverage is a powerful tool. Now, you're going to tell my men to stand down. You're going to let us finish the job." I glanced at Marta, her face pale with fear. I knew Martel wouldn't hesitate to hurt her. He was a ruthless man, capable of anything, but if I surrendered, they'd escape. They'd disappear into the storm, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. I had to find a way to save Marta and stop Martel. "What do you want, Martel?" I asked, stalling for time. "I want you to walk away. Forget everything you've seen. Let my men complete the transfer, and I might just consider letting your friends live." I looked at Carter, who was still struggling with the gunman. He gave me a slight nod, a signal that he was about to do something. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Martel," I said, raising my voice. "I'm not going to let you get away with this." Carter suddenly deactivated his access card, bypassing the security system and activating the ship's automatic alarm. A deafening siren wailed, cutting through the sound of the storm. "You idiot," Martel screamed, turning on Carter. "You've ruined everything." He signaled to his men, ordering them to deal with Carter. But it was too late. The wail of the sirens had attracted attention. In the distance, I could see flashing lights approaching. "Polis," a voice shouted. "Freeze. Drop your weapons." The chaos escalated. Gunfire erupted, ricocheting off the rain-soaked metal of the trucks. Martel's men scattered for cover, abandoning their posts. I used the distraction to move towards Marta, pushing past the two men holding her. I punched one in the face, sending him reeling. The other lunged at me with a knife. I blocked the attack, disarming him with a swift move. Marta stumbled towards me, clutching her shoulder. "I'm hit, Leo," she whispered. "It hurts." "You're going to be okay," I said, helping her to her feet. "Just stay close to me." Martel, realizing his plan was unraveling, made a desperate move. He grabbed a crate from one of the trucks, a large metal container marked with a cryptic symbol. He began pushing it towards the edge of the dock. "He is trying to get away," Kaplan shouted. "He is going to dump it in the water." I ran towards Martel, determined to stop him, but he was faster than I expected. He shoved me aside, sending me crashing into a stack of pallets. He pushed the crate into the swirling water. It disappeared beneath the surface with a muffled splash. "That is for the inconvenience, Agent Maxwell," Martel said. "Consider that a message to anyone who dares cross me." He turned to flee, disappearing into the darkness, but I wasn't going to let him escape. I stumbled to my feet, ignoring the pain in my ribs. I started after him, pushing through the chaos, determined to bring him to justice. Suddenly, a wave crashed over the dock, sending me sprawling. I looked up to see Martel standing on the edge of the dock, silhouetted against the stormy sky. Then, another wave crashed, larger and more powerful than the first. The water surged around his legs, engulfing him. He hesitated for a moment, then plunged into the surging current, disappearing from sight. Sirens screamed closer, illuminating the scene in a chaotic wash of red and blue. Police officers swarmed the dock, securing the area and tending to the injured. I stumbled over to Marta, checking her wound. It was bad, but not life-threatening. Paramedics rushed to her side, preparing to transport her to the hospital. As I watched them load Marta into the ambulance, I saw something floating in the water. A crate, identical to the one Martel had dumped, bobbing amidst the waves, and as the crate drifted closer, I recognized the symbol emblazoned on its side, the same symbol from the Cardinal case. The symbol of a shadowy organization that operated beyond the reach of the law, the symbol of the people who had protected Martel all along. And I realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Martel might be gone, but the forces that had enabled him were still out there, lurking in the shadows, and they would be coming for me. The water was frigid, relentless. Each wave that crashed over the dock threatened to sweep me away, but adrenaline kept me fighting. I had to find Martel, even if he was trying to escape, even if the odds were stacked against me. Following the faint trail of serial numbers etched onto the floating debris 7 remnants of the broken crate, I plunged into the flooded service tunnel, the water rising to my chest. The darkness was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning. The tunnel was a labyrinth, a network of concrete corridors designed for maintenance and access. It was also a perfect hiding place. I moved slowly, cautiously, my hands outstretched, feeling my way along the walls. The air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the smell of salt water and decay. The only sound was the rushing of the water and the distant wail of sirens. Then I saw a faint light ahead, a flickering glow emanating from a small, watertight control room. I moved towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, Martel was huddled over a radio, frantically trying to make contact with someone. He hadn't bothered to change out of his soaked raincoat. He looked defeated, desperate. "It is over, Martel," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. He turned, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and resignation. "You again, Maxwell. You just won't let it go, will you?" "This isn't about me," I said. "It is about justice. It is about holding you accountable for your crimes." "Justice?" Martel scoffed. "You think you understand justice? You were the one who misread the signal, the one who got Reyes killed. You're the reason Operation Cardinal fell apart." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. The old wounds reopened, raw and bleeding. I'd carried that guilt for years. "That wasn't my fault," I said, my voice trembling. "I was set up. Someone wanted that operation to fail." Martel smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Oh, I think it was. You were too eager, too ambitious. You stepped on some powerful toes, and you paid the price. You orchestrated it," I said, my voice rising. "You manipulated the situation to make it look like my mistake." "Perhaps I merely facilitated the outcome," Martel said, his voice smooth and condescending. "Sometimes a little nudge is all it takes to send things in the right direction." He lunged for a gun hidden under the control panel. But I was faster. I tackled him, knocking the weapon from his grasp. We grappled on the floor, a desperate struggle for survival. "You're nothing but a criminal, Martel," I said, pinning him down. "A parasite who preys on the weak." "I'm a survivor, Maxwell," Martel spat. "I adapt, I overcome, and I always land on my feet." Suddenly the lights flickered on, illuminating the room in a harsh, unforgiving glow. The control room was flooded with police officers, their weapons drawn. "Freeze, police." They pulled Martel off me and cuffed him, his struggles feeble and ineffective. "It is not over," Martel said, his eyes meeting mine. "They'll protect me. They always do." Outside, the chaos was beginning to subside. Paramedics were tending to the injured. Police officers were arresting the remaining members of Martel's crew. The storm was starting to ebb, the rain lessening to a drizzle. I found Marta being treated by paramedics, her shoulder bandaged. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "You got him," she said, her voice hoarse. "We got him," I replied. "Thanks to you." Kaplan was standing nearby, looking relieved. He'd managed to free himself from his captors and assist the paramedics. "I wanted to do the right thing," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm sorry I was caught up in all this." "You did," I said. "You helped save a life." The police began collecting evidence, the stolen cash, the incriminating documents, the coded communications. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Several high-ranking officials, including a city councilman and a prominent casino executive, were implicated in the scheme. A network of corrupt contractors had been used to siphon money from the casino, laundering it through offshore accounts. The investigation would be massive, complex, and politically charged. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, justice would finally be served. I walked away from the scene, feeling emotionally drained but strangely exhilarated. I'd faced my demons, confronted my past, and emerged victorious. As I reached my car, I noticed something tucked under the windshield wiper, an envelope. I picked it up, my heart sinking. It was addressed to me in Martel's handwriting. I tore it open and pulled out a single photograph. It was a Polaroid of me, taken during the raid on the Cardinal operation. My younger self, full of confidence and misguided ambition, was frozen in time, standing in the middle of the chaotic warehouse. But the photograph wasn't just a snapshot of the past. It was a message, a warning, a reminder that the forces that had ruined my career were still at play. On the back of the photograph, Martel had written a single sentence: "Some debts are never truly paid." Morning dawned, grey and weary, mirroring my own exhaustion. The storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a city struggling to recover. But amidst the wreckage, there was a sense of cautious optimism. News helicopters circled the Golden Tide, broadcasting footage of the arrests and the recovery of the stolen funds. Headlines screamed about the elaborate heist, the corrupt officials, and the casino's narrow escape. "Casino heist uncovered, local officials implicated," read one banner. "Storm concealed $1 million fraud," declared another. The narrative was shifting. My narrative. The initial reports had focused on the security breach and the casino's vulnerability. Now, they were highlighting my role in uncovering the conspiracy. My relentless pursuit of the truth. I sat in a sterile interrogation room at the police headquarters, giving a taped statement. It wasn't an official apology, not yet, but it was a chance to tell my side of the story, to reframe the events of the Cardinal operation in light of the new evidence. "I made mistakes," I said, my voice steady. "I misread a signal, but I was set up. I was deliberately misled. The information I received was flawed, and someone wanted that operation to fail." I detailed Martel's connections, the web of corruption that had protected him for years. I spoke about the pressure I'd faced, the attempts to discredit me, the career I'd lost. "This wasn't just about stolen money," I concluded. "It was about power, about control, and about protecting those who abuse it." The detective leading the investigation, a grizzled veteran named Miller, nodded slowly. "We've already uncovered a lot, Maxwell, but your statement will be invaluable. It'll help us build a stronger case against those responsible." He promised to keep me informed, to let me know when the official investigation concluded. But I didn't hold my breath. The wheels of justice turned slowly, especially when powerful people were involved. When I left the police station, I drove directly to the Golden Tide. The casino was still in a state of disarray, but the worst of the chaos had passed. Workers were clearing debris, repairing damage, and preparing to reopen. I found Marta in her office, overseeing the clean-up efforts. She looked tired, but her eyes sparkled with a newfound determination. "You're back," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just checking on you," I said. "How is the shoulder?" "It'll heal. It is not the first time I've been knocked around in this business. The district attorney wants to talk to me, but I told him I'll hold off until I consult with a lawyer." "Smart move. You have every right to protect yourself." "I almost left, you know," she said, her voice soft. "I almost walked away from it all. But then I realized I can't. This casino, it is my life, and I'm not going to let these criminals ruin it." "You're a strong woman, Marta," I said, feeling a surge of admiration. "You'll do the right thing." Roque approached us, his expression uncharacteristically subdued. "Maxwell," his voice gruff, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. You were right all along." It wasn't a fulsome apology, but it was enough. It was an acknowledgement of my contributions, a recognition of my integrity. Maybe we can rebuild this place together," he said, extending his hand. I hesitated for a moment, then shook it. "I'm willing to try." The casino's owners had announced a major overhaul of their security protocols, implementing tighter controls, upgrading surveillance technology, and conducting thorough background checks on all employees. They'd also publicly acknowledged my role in uncovering the conspiracy, praising my courage and dedication. I wasn't offered my old job back, not immediately, but I was offered a consulting position, tasked with reviewing their security measures and recommending improvements. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. It was a chance to redeem myself, to prove that I was still capable of making a difference. Days turned into weeks. The investigation continued to unfold, exposing a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of the city government. Several officials were indicted on charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. The scandal dominated the headlines, shaking public trust in the system. I threw myself into my work, meticulously reviewing security logs, interviewing employees, and identifying vulnerabilities. I felt like I was finally back in my element, doing what I was meant to do. One afternoon, while sorting through my mail, I found a sealed envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar. IT, the spidery script of Frank Bellwether. I opened the envelope and pulled out a handwritten letter. Leo, I've been following the news closely. I'm proud of you, my boy. You were right all along, and you finally got the recognition you deserved. I'm sorry it took so long. I know you're wrestling with what to do next. I have a contact, a private investigator, who runs a small firm here in New Orleans. He is looking for someone with your skills and experience. I've already spoken to him about you. He is impressed. If you're interested, I can put you in touch. It wouldn't be the bureau, but it would be a chance to use your talents to continue fighting the good fight. Sincerely, Frank Bellwether. I read the letter several times, my heart swelling with a mixture of hope and trepidation. It was an offer of a second chance, a chance to rebuild my career, to return to the work I loved. I looked out the window at the city slowly recovering from the storm. The sun was shining, the sky was blue. Maybe, just maybe, I could find peace. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally put the past behind me. Maybe, just maybe, I could start a new chapter, a chapter filled with purpose, redemption, and a renewed faith in the power of justice. But as I held the letter in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. Martel might be behind bars, but the forces that had corrupted him were still out there, lurking in the shadows, watching and plotting their revenge. The salt air tasted different now, less like a carefree vacation and more like a constant reminder, a reminder of loss, of betrayal, of the relentless power of the Gulf. Months had passed since the storm, since the unraveling of Martel's conspiracy, but the scars remained, etched into the landscape and the collective memory. I walked the newly repaired boardwalk, the wood still smelling faintly of treated lumber, and the sea. The tourist crowds were beginning to return, their laughter echoing across the water. But the joy felt muted, tainted by the knowledge of what had lurked beneath the surface, the darkness that had almost consumed this place. I paused at a memorial, a simple stone plaque listing the names of those who had been lost during the hurricane and its aftermath. Reyes' name was there, Marta's father's name was there, and a dozen others whose lives had been cut short by the fury of the storm. I touched the cold stone, offering a silent prayer for their souls. I'd learned a hard lesson. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about acknowledging it, accepting it, and living with the consequences. It wasn't clean or complete. It was messy, imperfect, and ongoing. I met Frank Bellwether at a small, unassuming diner just outside of town. He looked older, more fragile than I remembered, but his eyes still held that same spark of wisdom and compassion. "So, you've been thinking about it," he said, stirring his coffee. "I have," I said. "The private investigation job, a chance to use my skills to do some good." "It is not glamorous work," he said. Mostly background checks, surveillance, insurance fraud. But it is honest, and it'll give you a chance to rebuild your reputation, to clear your name. It won't erase the past, I said. No, Bellwether agreed. It won't, but it can help you move forward. It can give you a sense of purpose, and sometimes that is all we can ask for. He'd spoken to the agency owner, a former FBI colleague of ours. He'd vetted me, assured them I was a capable investigator. Despite my troubled history, it wasn't a full reinstatement, not even close, but it was a start. I'll take it, I said, a feeling of quiet determination settling over me. I'm ready. Later that day, I walked through the Golden Tide. The casino was coming back to life. Slot machines blinked and whirred. Cards were dealt at the blackjack tables, and the rhythmic clatter of roulette wheels filled the air. It was a far cry from the chaotic scene I'd witnessed during the storm. I found Marta standing near the main entrance, watching the activity with a thoughtful expression. She'd overseen the entire renovation, implementing the new security protocols, and working tirelessly to restore the casino to its former glory. "It is good to see it like this again," she said, her voice soft, alive. "You did an amazing job, Marta," I said. "You turned this place around." "We did it together," she replied, offering me a small smile. "We all did, even Ol Rourke." We stood in silence for a moment, watching the crowds milling about. "Are you staying?" I asked. "For now," she said. "This place, it has become a part of me, and I want to see it thrive. I want to make sure something like this never happens again." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her strength and resilience. "I'm going to take the job," I said, "the investigator position." "I'm glad, Leo," she said. "You deserve a second chance." "I don't know if I deserve it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "but I'm going to take it anyway." Before leaving, I went back to the small security office where I'd given my initial statement, the room where everything had started to shift. I sat at the table and composed a final report, not for the authorities, not for the casino, but for myself. It wasn't a detailed recap of the investigation. It was a personal reckoning, a painful examination of my mistakes and failures. I acknowledged my arrogance, my ambition, and my tendency to operate outside the rules. I admitted that I'd let my desire for vindication cloud my judgment. I wrote about the guilt I'd carried for years, the weight of Reyes' death, and the false sense of responsibility I'd allowed myself to bear. I wrote about the lessons I'd learned, the importance of trust, the fragility of justice, and the enduring power of forgiveness. I sealed the report, addressed it to myself, and placed it in a locked file cabinet. It wasn't a closure thivine. There was some pain that would always remain. It was an acknowledgement, a way of finally letting go. As I walked out of the casino, the sun was setting over the Gulf. The sky was ablaze with color, painting the water in hues of orange, pink, and gold. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of salt and blossoms. I paused at the edge of the boardwalk, taking one last look at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the shore, a rhythmic, relentless force. The sounds of the casino soon, the laughter, the music, the clatter of coins signed faded into the background. I knew I couldn't erase the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes I'd made, but I could choose how I moved forward. I could choose to embrace hope, to seek redemption, to live a life of purpose. As I turned and walked away, I heard the distant sound of breaking waves, a low, mournful rumble that seemed to echo the complexities of my heart. The coast super and my life too would never be the same. But perhaps, just perhaps, that was a good thing. The tide had turned, and I was ready to face whatever lay ahead.